So whatever we learned over 25, 30 years in the industry, we always wanted to give it back to the industry. So we started working with small and medium-sized enterprises because that was the space we felt they probably cannot look at large consulting firms like McKinsey or Deloitte. And that was the space where people were looking for support in terms of fulfilling their aspiration in terms of business growth or profitability. And that was the space where we started working in 2016. And in last 5 years, we have served more than 72 clients. So if you ask me, what are the two key areas in which Leap to Excel works? One of them is growth consulting, and second is leadership development. Kedar has already mentioned about it, but I thought, let me add a few things to the whole profile. So with this background, we will start with today's session on strategic thinking. So we will talk about strategic thinking today. So there are two very interesting words when we say strategic thinking. So one of them is strategy, other is the thinking part of it. Now, if we look at our day-to-day life, okay, we keep mentioning this particular word, strategy. So let me give you two or three simple examples for you to collect it or connect it with those situations. Now, a cricket team playing on the field, when they want to beat a particular team, they think strategically what we are going to do so that we will be in a position to beat our opponent. If there is a very good batsman who is coming as the opener from the opponent's space, you will say strategically, what should we do so that we will be in a position to get him out quickly? Or even for that matter, imagine there is a educational institution, and institution is at, say, X number in that particular city, and their objective is to reach the top spot. They will decide what activities, what actions, what thinking we need to do so that we can, from X level, we can actually go to the top position in that particular city. So all these simple situations, what we see on day-to-day basis, they are all related to strategy. And the thinking part, which goes behind for achieving that particular thing, is nothing else but the strategy thinking part. So when it's actually not different when we talk about organizations, whether it's small or whether it's big. Every small and medium-sized organizations today will have some kind of an aspiration. So they will have some strategic objective in mind. So when we say strategic objective, it could be related to in terms of revenue growth. It can be increase in profitability. It can be attaining a specific market share, or it can be entering into a new market, or even for that matter, exports. So all these are strategic objectives set by the organization for themselves. So even when our strategic objectives are clear, yeah, we define them, but still we find the situation where our colleagues, our bosses talk about, you need to think strategically here. And many a times with this particular statement, people are not clear exactly what I'm expected to do. Kedar, go to the next slide. Kedar, the moment I say next, just go to the next slide. So there are two critical strategy questions. Okay? So one important thing is, can you summarize your company's strategy in 35 words or less? We talk about strategic objectives, but is there a statement? Like we always talk about a vision statement for the company. How do we want to see our organization as 5 years down the line? We talk about mission statement. How do we want to reach there? We talk about goals, which is a quantification of whatever objectives we have set in mind. But do we have a strategy statement in place? It's very, very important to have strategy statement in place. And another important aspect is, are all our colleagues put it in the same way? That is everybody aligned to that strategy statement? If there is a leadership team, second level supervisory team, and then we have the workmen, Do they understand or think alike, or their understanding is similar when it comes to the strategic objective of the company? So the biggest problem for different companies, whether it's small or big, the problem is it's unclear strategy. They have strategic objectives in place, but the strategy statement is not clear. So these are the two typical examples I've tried to capture here. Like people say, I really don't know if we would be better of winning this particular deal at a lower price or just losing the business. Or people say, I try for months to get an initiative off the ground and then it's shut down because it doesn't fit into my strategy. Next. So the solution for all this, you need to have a clear, concise, and communicated strategy statement. And it should be communicated across the organization. So what are the benefits? There is aligned behavior. So everybody is thinking alike when it comes to strategy. There are empowered employees, and naturally, because of that, there is a increased effectiveness overall for the organization. Next. So when we talk about strategy statement, there are three critical elements we need to look at. So one is the objective, what we touched upon when we started the session. What is the strategic objective the company has and its scope? And third important element is what is the competitive advantage we have as an organization? So when you combine these three, you will be in a position to come to a strategy statement for your own organization. Important part is you need to co-create it. So there will be top management, there will be middle management, but everybody is connected to customers. They're connected to market. They're connected to. So these three elements we need to keep it in mind. What are our strategic objectives? What is the overall scope? And what is our competitive advantage? So all these 3 points put together will help us in terms of creating the strategy statement for our own company. So where does it fit? So you all must have heard of these particular words, and you will definitely must be having your own vision, mission statement. As I mentioned a few minutes back, the vision is how do you want to see your organization? The mission is how you want to reach there and your own values. So what does strategy do? It actually what our competitive game plan will be to conquer the competition or our clear existence at the marketplace. So strategy objective with scope, with advantage, and with objective, we will be in a position to combine the strategy statement or direction for the organization. So after understanding or throwing some light on the strategy part, because in the beginning I mentioned about two words, strategy and strategic thinking. So there are two parts, strategy and thinking part. So when we are talking about strategy statement, that was the first element of writing your own statement, which fits into 35 words. And then having alignment with everybody, whether all my colleagues or everybody in the organization writes similar statement or same statement, is their understanding is exactly the same. And now important part is how do you think strategically? Because by just putting this particular strategy on paper is not going to help really. So we will talk about the strategic thinking part. So there is a very interesting model. People who have done some marketing course or have read some marketing material, they must have heard of Porter's 5 forces that shape industry competition. Now, why I'm using this particular model here, I will not be spending too much time, but to make you understand why this is very, very important. Because while talking about strategy statement, we talked about one word called advantage, right? What is our competitive advantage as an organization? So what are the 5 elements we are going to look at to understand the industry competition? So rivalry amongst existing competitors, All of you will agree that any organization, if you are in the space of steel, you are in the space of cement, you are in the space of manufacturing foods and beverages, or you are in the space of manufacturing auto components, everybody will have competitors. And there is always a threat of new entrants coming into the space. Two things, buyers and suppliers, they're always in the bargaining mode. So they have a bargaining power. So in very, very few of us will be working in the monopolistic situation. So it's very important to understand what is the bargaining power of a buyer. And similarly, it's very important to understand bargaining power of suppliers. And then the fourth element, which will talk about rivalry amongst existing competitors, is related to threat from substitute products or services. I would love to give you one example here. There was a company called Vikas WSP. They were into guar gum. And this was the monopolistic product which they were supplying it to foods and beverages and other industries manufacturing pastries. Now, suddenly there was a company from China who came out with synthetic chemical products similar to guar gum. And naturally, the application was similar. The product was acceptable to the industry. This particular company had a huge problem in the marketplace because of the substitute product being available. You must have heard of Hindustan Photo Films, who were manufacturing those rolls for photography. After introduction of camera in the mobile, the entire industry of photographic films is gone. So it's a threat of substitute or services. So when we are studying the entire market or looking at industry or competition, it's very important to look at these four elements before we come to the strategy, objective, scope, and the competitive advantage what we have. So it is bargaining power of the buyer, bargaining power of the supplier, threat of new entrants, that is the competitor, and threat of substitute products or services. Kedar? So what is the strategic sweet spot? Now from the Porter's model, we try to understand the 5 elements which we need to understand regarding the competition. So the sweet spot is basically in between the company's capability. Every organization of yours will have some set of capabilities. Some people have manufacturing capability, which is giving you advantage at the marketplace in terms of price or technology. You might have collaborated with some company outside, and which is giving you a clear advantage at the marketplace because you are very, very advanced in terms of the technology part. Some people are into volume manufacturing, and that's probably the reason they are in a position to manufacture the same part at a much reasonable price. So anything could be your capability. Distribution, product, your logistics, your better packaging, your manufacturing, anything can be your company's capability. So whatever capability you are in the position to utilize to fulfill the customer needs is actually the sweet spot. And that will naturally be decided by the keeping the context into your mind, which is technology, industry, or demographics. So one element before we actually look at the definition of strategic thinking, all these elements, we need to keep it in mind in addition to competitors offer. That will help you in terms of deciding what is that sweet spot by which you will be able to not only conquer the competition, but conquer the market. And whatever strategic objective you have in mind, you will be able to fulfill that. So after understanding what is strategy and what is thinking part we have not yet touched upon, the competitor or advantage part of strategy through Porter's model and understanding of competition, let's look at the simple definition of strategic thinking. Now, everybody will have a different dimension to share about strategic thinking. Or some people will say, why to put it in the particular line? But this is the broad-based definition. So when you talk about strategic thinking in its most basic sense, strategic thinking is about analyzing opportunities and problems related to your company from a broad perspective and understanding the potential impact your actions might have on others. So if you have clarity on these the three critical dimensions, analyzing opportunities and problems, and understanding potential impact it can have on others, this is related to the thinking process. Now, the question is how you are going to develop it and what are the different elements of strategic thinking. So let's look at different elements. So elements are basically every one of you should be in a position to see a big picture. I'm going to spend few minutes on this particular point in the next slide, then we will talk about big picture. But everyone should look beyond, because this is a typical challenge what we have observed in our last 6 years of journey of Live to Excel. That with small and medium-sized organizations where we have interacted or where we have actually worked, they are continuously busy or tied up because of their day-to-day mundane things, repetitive things which are happening. And they are firefighting all the day. And they do not have enough time, or they do not invest enough time in looking at the bigger picture of the industry. What is happening outside? What is happening with the competition? What is happening with the policies? What is happening in the marketplace? Which is going to help you strategically decide what needs to be changed in your organization, okay, so that you can attain or achieve your strategic objective. Articulating strategic objectives. We spoke about this particular element in the first few slides. Identifying relationship patterns and trends, trend of the market, trend of competition. We have spoken about it. Then you have to get really creative when you are talking about strategic elements. Creativity is something, thinking differently, thinking out of box, thinking, can there be a different way of doing the same thing what I'm doing today? Whether it can be any functional area in the organization. So when it comes to one example, when I'm packing in a particular way, had we any time thought of giving vegetables or fruit in shrink packaged plastic bag? We never thought about it. But people became creative. Different packaging machines or methods came into the marketplace. And today, that's one of the finest applications because they remain fresh. And further, even people have started talking about vacuum packing. So there are different innovations happening in that particular space. So people are getting creative in terms of packaging part. Similarly, people are talking about creatively manufacturing something in a different way. Few people from manufacturing might be aware that gears were always manufactured with mild steel or some will in a different metal. But somebody thought of coming out with Teflon, which used actually for manufacturing gears. And it was a different way or different thinking, very creative way of looking at the same thing. They naturally got a lot of advantages because of that. And that kind of thinking is really, really required. So when we are talking about thinking, we have to see a big picture. We need to articulate strategic objectives and keep revisiting them. Because looking at the parameters or the factors of outside world, we need to again revisit and change and articulate our own objectives. Identify the relationships, patterns, and trends of the market. Getting more creative, as I just gave 2 or 3 different examples. And then the next most important thing, analyzing information. Because most of the time, our observation is that the decisions in SME space are taken on the basis of gut feel more than the data. So are we taking decisions on the basis of information or data which is available with us? Is it done scientifically? This is one element which actually will make or break things, because you will decide to go strategically into a particular line. I'll give you one example, that if you are manufacturing X product and you have plans of entering into Y very aggressively without making a business case, or without studying the market adequately, without making financial case, or without making plan B, which is part of the sensitivity analysis, great chance is you might not be successful. So it's very important to understand what are the sources which are available for giving you information and how to utilize it for strategic decision. So this strategic thinking part, okay, should come naturally to you. Then prioritizing your actions. Whatever you decide, do you understand difference between priority and important? Very, very delicate element of business. Everything is important for us, but are we prioritizing our action? And the last, the most important, is making trade-offs. What do you want to do in the next 3 years in the business? And more importantly, what you do not want to do in the next 3 years in the business. If there are different choices available, which particular choice you will be going ahead with? So naturally, if out of 4 or 5 different alternatives made available to you in business, which one are you going to say yes, or which you are going to say no? Is it based on the analysis of information available about the product? So making trade-off is one of the most important thing when it comes to strategic thinking part. So these are the 7 elements, okay, which are very, very important in strategic thinking. So what are the characteristics? A good strategic thinker always will have a curiosity. Okay? Then curiosity, I need not spend time on that, because many times we say small kids are very curious, who keep asking questions, right? It's not the age. The curiosity dimension comes naturally with a person. A good strategic thinker always is curious about what is happening in the marketplace, what is happening in the technology, what is happening with my competitor. Are my customers happy? Is curious. Adaptability with the new change, adaptability with new technology, with manufacturing processes. So adapting to this changing need is again very, very important. The focus should not be on today. It should not be related to what I am doing right now. Is that firefighting going to help me all the time? But the focus should be on future. How do we want to see my company 3 years down the line? There has to be positive outlook. Definitely difficult situations will come. Challenges will come. And you are fighting against these particular challenges. As you have made your organizations, you have come to certain level. You have definitely done something good, something very positive, because of which you have reached this level. But keeping that positive mindset or positive outlook all the time is a characteristic of strategic thinker. He should be open to the ideas, because ideas will keep coming. We should not be looking at that traditionally for 20 years I've been doing business in a particular way. A person who is a strategic thinker will have openness to even adapt and accept the change. So this openness is required, and breadth of the business, the depth and the breadth we always talk about. So these are 6 characteristics which will help you in being a good strategic thinker. So first we talked about 6 elements of strategic thinking, and now we talked about characteristics of good strategic thinker. So in the beginning, when we talked about strategy thinking, I touched upon one element called the big picture. Now, why this is important? Because in the strategy statement, we talked about objective, scope, and advantage, the competitive advantage part. So while seeing the big picture, what are the parameters you will look at? What are the parameters you would like to see? So just, I will go through those particular elements. So what is the seeing big picture means? To understand the broader business environment in which you actually operate. So look at the next slide, talking about what we want to look at when we are looking at the big picture. Okay, so these are the questions you might be having in your mind. These are the questions for which answers could be ready with you in your mind. It might be available with your sales team. They might be available with your production team. But is it documented? Is this information documented? Very, very important. Do we together deliberate on these particular elements? Do we relook at the strategy part of the strategic objectives after studying all these elements of the market? So look at them. Who are your key customers? So we know that from organized sector, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So when we talk about Hindustan Unilever, they will say in soaps, Wipro is my competition. Colgate is my competition. Godrej is my competition. They know. But for smaller players, the competition could be from unorganized sector. So do we track what are my competitors doing and do we document it? Why it is important? Because knowledge is power. That is going to help you in terms of deciding and coming out with the right strategic objective. What unique forms of value does your company offers to them? So when we talk about value proposition, how am I different from my competition? Is it the quality? Is it the delivery time? Is it the complexity in which you handle the requirement of the customer? Is it better commercial terms? What is it that is actually giving you that add-on value to your company? How might their needs and preferences evolve in future? Do we anytime study and ask this question to our customers? We are your suppliers. We have grown with you. Is it same requirement you are going to continue or will there be a change? So the important question to answer or to reflect on is whether their needs and preferences are going to change and how they're going to evolve. I'm talking about automotive because I've spent my entire life there. But in automotive, when this shift happened from standard diesel and petrol vehicles to electrical vehicles, unless the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 suppliers gear up for this particular change happening in the market, will they be in a position to remain in the market? The answer could be no. So these needs of the customers, these needs of our OEMs needs to be understood. Now, what could be your company do to fulfill customer changing requirements? So there are two ways we can look at it. One, we will say no. If you are asking for a particular part, we are unable to do it. But in most of the small and medium-sized enterprises, they will say, fine, if this is the change coming, we will gear up ourselves for that particular change. And we will ensure that your needs are fulfilled. Now, for that particular changing requirement, you need to prepare yourself from the beginning. That's seeing the big picture. Because tomorrow, suddenly, if they change the schedule and they change the design of a part what you are supplying today, you will not get sufficient time to even prepare yourself. So that preparation part starts much earlier than the actual supply or actual need of the customer. What industry trends might have important implications for your company's business? So when I'm talking about trend, I just gave a couple of examples. So one, we are talking about customer needs. Second, we are talking about trend change in the industry. Mobile. We are talking about mobile banking today, right? Everything has come on mobile. So there was a major shift from pager to mobile, from Hindustan photo film example, what I gave you, from film to camera. So there are so many applications for which this entire industry got shifted. So with this change, with digitization, a lot of things are changing. So this industry change trend, we need to understand and need to understand what important implications, okay, it will have on your company's business. And last but not the least, how might your company take advantage of opportunities offered by emerging industry trend? So if you are geared up, you will be in a position to take advantage of that situation and come out as a winner, because that's a big opportunity which is being made available for you. So when I said seeing the big picture, these are the 7 different elements we should be looking at. Now, collectively, all that information is going to help us in 2 ways. One, improve, okay, our position in terms of understanding of advantage vis-a-vis our competition. How different we are. What is my value proposition? What is my differentiating strategy? And that is the space where they are going to help us. So how can I do it? Because everybody might ask, if fine, we have a strategy in place, we have strategic objectives in place, we have a team which is completely aligned to the strategic objective by putting strategy statement in place. Now, we also talked about elements of strategic thinking, and we talked about characteristics of strategic thinkers. But you might ask a question to me, how to bring in this strategic thinking? Is it inborn? For few people, they might be better strategic thinkers. So typically in sports, you will find a particular captain will have a way of managing things. Other might or might not have it. So in that particular situation, is there a way or is there a method by which we can improve this particular skill? So yes, there are 4 important elements to this, which will help you in terms of improving your strategic thinking skills. Know, think, speak, and act. So when we say know, observe and seek trends. We have spoken about it earlier. How to do it? Next slide, we'll talk about it. Think, ask tough questions, and stay with them. Talk strategic, and make time for thinking and embrace conflict. As I was mentioning, most of SME companies today spend very, very few time in thinking what really is changing, how I am going to be adaptive to that particular change, and how I will emerge as a winner. So these 4 elements I'm going to discuss in next 4 slides before we conclude this particular session. So let's first talk about know, observe, and seek trends. So when I'm talking about knowing, make it a routine exercise to explore and synthesize the internal trends in your day-to-day work. For example, pay attention to the issues that get raised over and over in your organization. Many a times in maintenance, people keep talking about machine mein awaaz aa raha hai, machine mein awaaz aa raha hai. There is a possibility the bearing is going to fail. But repeatedly, these particular problems emerge, which actually reflects on your manufacture. How many times we give a serious look at machine maintenance? How many times we have preventive maintenance scheduled, rigorously followed? So if these kind of problems emerge, we have to blame ourselves. So we need to basically pay attention, okay, continuously, keep exploring, keep synthesizing. And whatever common obstacles you or your colleagues are, overcome them. Be proactive about connecting with peers, both in your organization and industry. Our competitors or our industry people teach us more than what we can learn within the organization. And this is mainly to understand their observation of the marketplace. Because what we see, what we observe is limited to our understanding, but they might add so many dimensions to the whole thing. And a brilliant business idea can emerge, or an alternate process might emerge. So as a standard practice, when we say no, keep interacting with peers. I'm not saying you are not doing today, but all the people who are not doing it or doing it in a very limited way should start interacting with peers, your organization, as well as the industry people. And then whatever are the learnings, share in the network. So today when we have manufacturers associations, there are a lot of industrial groups who come together and share this particular knowledge. Because by sharing knowledge or knowledge sharing, we do not help competition to grow. It is actually the other way around. It actually helps us to become proactive, and actually helps us to become adaptive. It helps us to become competitive in the marketplace. And then understand the unique information and perspective that your function provides and define its impact on the corporate level strategy. Everyone working in the organization, even it's a 10 people company or 50 people company or 500 people company, the unique information and perspective of your function, everybody in the organization should understand, and they should align it with the overall strategy of the company. So this was the first element, no. Second, we are talking about think. So ask tough questions and stay with them. So how many times we actually dare to ask tough questions, especially if there is a subordinate reporting to a manager or to the boss? Do we ask this kind of a question? So with a fresh understanding of trends and issues, what we did in the first element of no, ask yourself, how do I broaden what I consider? Right? So questions, as yourself, what does success look like in 1 year for me? What does it look in 3 years? How it can impact the outcome in a negative way? What are the early signs of success or failure? Do my team members need to understand to ensure its success? And do the outcomes support the product goals of the organization? Now, these are typical questions I have just put in front of in the slide. I can give examples, but because of the time availability, we will just put them and we will share with that what type of thinking we need to do to broaden, okay, my understanding or my thinking, which will help me to become a better strategy thinker. Third element, we talk about speak. So talk strategy, prioritize and sequence your thoughts. So in the beginning of the presentation, I talked about important and very, very important and priority. So what is your priority? Everything is important in the company or in your business. What is my priority and what is its sequence? So that needs to do not only with actions, even with your thoughts. Add more structure to a written and verbal communication. Only focus on core messages. Group and logically order your main points and keep things as concise as possible. Many times, even at corporate level, you must have observed, people don't talk to the point. They are not concise in communication. They are not concise even in written communication. So the message you want to give, okay, It's never given in the right way. So if you want to develop strategic thinking capabilities, it's important to know, it's important to speak, right? Very clearly talk strategic. So prime your audience by giving them the heads up on the overarching topics you want to address. So they are prepared to engage in a higher level conversation. Don't give only tactical data. Because unless they start thinking on the similar way, overall company will never get benefit. And adapt a practice of giving the answer first instead of building up to your main point. So 3 clear things we have covered when you talk about improving your skills as a good strategic thinker. So 3rd element we have covered just now, and the 4th and the last one is act. So evaluate your tasks based on urgency and importance. You have spoken about it. Say no. Stop going to meetings or activities you don't need to be at. Now, this line itself could be very challenging. You will say, if my boss is calling me for the meeting, how can I say no? But it's important that if you are a part of the strategic thinking team, right, which is everybody in the organization, you should be only attending what is actually required by you to attend.
So there is no voice.
There is no voice.
No, Abhay, your
No,
voice
we
is
can hear you. We can hear you, Abhay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So just go one slide earlier to that. Last one, 20-second. Yeah. So learn to say no. Because many a times it's a fear in everybody's mind that if I say no, what will happen? But an organization which is adaptive, which is thinking strategically, which is having a clear strategic objective in place, they will in fact like you saying no for the right thing. Block out thinking time. This is one activity which most of the people don't do. In your day's time, 1 hour, you should be spending X number of hours. You should be spending thinking about the organization, thinking about what is happening in the outside market, thinking about competition, thinking about imports, thinking about new markets, all the dimensions what you have covered in the strategic objective. We don't get time to think, so we don't get time to work on the strategic element. So that thinking becomes important because of this. Fight back the initial guilt that am I doing real work when I'm just sitting at my desk thinking? This is a big guilt when we actually interacted with people. People say if I'm sitting on the chair doing nothing, that means I'm not really doing any work. But that is not the case. There has to be some time. You should be actually investing in the thinking part. And then embrace, debate, and invite challenge. The 4th element or 5th element of act. Without letting it personal, so that you could ask tough questions. Let it be challenging. Let there be a debate. Because if there is a positive debate for the company, for the business, it is always going to help the organization. And always focus on the issues and not the people. And this will help you in terms of improving your strategic thinking skills. So we will go to the last slide, which is takeaway. So from this entire presentation or our small interaction, we tried to cover 3 elements: the strategy part, the thinking part, and how to club these 2 things. In the strategic thinking part, we talked about even the elements of strategic thinking, the characteristic of strategic thinker, and then how to improve those particular skills. So takeaway, start by changing your own mindset. If you believe that strategic thinking is only for senior executives, think again. It is at every level of the organization. Even the person who is working at a workman level at the foundry or at the workshop, he is very, very important in terms of the input. So he can think strategically. Language doesn't matter. So his input, his way of looking at business will help us in terms of the overall improvement. Strategic thinking can and must happen at every level. It's one of those unwritten parts of all job description. We never write in our JD what are our roles and responsibilities. But strategic thinking naturally goes with every job description. So I'll repeat the last 4 lines because before I conclude, focus on 4 developing abilities, 4 key abilities. Know, observe, and seek trends. Think, ask tough questions and stay with them. Speak, talk strategic, and act. Make time for thinking and embrace conflict. Believe me, if you touch upon these elements, build a strategic statement and start thinking strategically across the organization, you yourself will see a fantastic result at the end of the day. Because everybody will work towards the common objective, what you will set for yourself as an organization. So thank you very much for patient hearing.
I have one question because this is not only related to SM businesses, it is also for the general in a day-to-day life. How do you start thinking strategically, right, in your day-to-day life? And you've given us 4 abilities, right? Know, think, speak, and act, right?
Yes.
So this is very easy to hear, right?
Yeah.
From tomorrow, you start knowing what are the trends, or you start thinking about tough questions, or you start speaking strategically, or you act. But it's very difficult. How do you get them into your day-to-day life, right? So are there any tips and tricks, or is there a starting point that how do you start working on these 4 abilities?
Kedar, the first point is you need to believe that by doing this, you would be a better strategic thinker.
Okay.
That's the first element. Second part is the discipline. So you imagine that you really like sweets. And from tomorrow, you want to go for dieting. And you are not supposed to eat those particular things.
All right.
So you need to, in a very disciplined way, tell your body and your mind that I'm not going to have it. Similarly, on a positive side, okay, you should tell yourself that these are the 4 elements I'm going to practice.
Okay.
So, Kedar, believe me, this journey is not simple. It will take time. Okay. And over the period, you yourself will feel the change. I'm not seeing the change, feel the change. That you have started thinking differently than what you were doing earlier.
Right. And that is where my second question comes. So what are the benefits that SMEs will see once they start doing this as a habit, right? Start observing trends, start asking tough questions, start acting on those areas, right? So what are the change that they will actually bring into their business and day-to-day life once started?
So, Kedar, I can think of 2-3 advantages immediately, which I will share. First, most important thing, they will move or shift from a day-to-day firefighting to a more organized and planned way of managing business.
Right.
That is the first advantage. Second advantage is, instead of taking decisions on gut feel, they will take decisions which will be data-driven. So the possibility of success of a business will naturally go up. Third, as they will have absolute clarity on what is going to be my strategy for the next 3 years. Any investment they do in people, in infrastructure, in machinery, or in expanding business, or those are decisions will be properly weighed and then taken. So the chance of success in terms of business or fulfilling their own aspirations will be much, much better. So these are critical three elements that I can think of immediately. Very few people have a habit of making a daily plan with a diary. Now, if I have 20 things to do, can I write in front of that what is important and what is my top priority for today? If I do it, I will naturally focus on those activities which are a priority instead of running around all the activities considering that they're important. So one of the simple tips is managing or maintaining your own digital diary on your computer or on your laptop or your mobile for that matter. Very, very simple thing to do. But that prioritization needs to be done at 9:15 in the morning before the day starts or one day prior to you actually coming to the office.